Civilizations are large numbers of people living together and searching for a sense of happiness. Anthropologists will call them states, and I think we can also look at them as complex cultures. The meaning of that will become apparent as we unfold this discussion. We often think of civilizations as manifesting things like monumental architecture and writing. In actuality, they really are a type of social system. There are many interacting societies within them. They interact with many other societies external to them. Found within a large region, they have common cultural features. They're very complex systems of government which manifest themselves as part of dealing with a very large and complex society. I tend to talk about two kinds of societies, those that are egalitarian and those that are non-egalitarian. Egalitarian simply means that people see themselves as equal. Bands and tribes are egalitarian. Chiefdoms and states are non-egalitarian forms of social organization. Chiefdoms are the level of which we think of societies breaking down what has been an equal society into one that is unequal. There are hierarchical levels within a chiefdom, and these are based on rank and status and wealth, and you were born into a position of that society. This is really a matter of scale, where larger populations and larger regions are involved. There's a tendency for this to incorporate several chiefdoms into a single larger structure. There are 3 or more levels of hierarchy that are manifest in what is an evolving state. Anthropologists tend to think of states as having greater numbers of bureaucratic levels and more bureaucrats themselves. Decision-making is hierarchically based, and there's a greater scale of territory that is involved with what is thought of as a state. The issue that we face is, why does this transition occur? There have been a number of explanations. One is that irrigation created it. Second, warfare created it. Third, population scale or population growth. Or 4, trade and symbiotic relationships with other entities in a surrounding area and the ability to then control those sense of trade and wealth that comes from that. Then there's also a model of cooperation and competition. Any of these focus on the idea that, like the hydraulic management concept, that it took leadership and management to schedule, to create the cooperation, and out of that, the leadership gained wealth and power, and then control of society. Clearly, the growth of population was going to put pressure on societies, and there's a sense of something called circumscription, this idea of being bounded by other societies, not being able to expand. The space for agriculture, the space for producing food, being restricted, led to warfare and increasing competition. This too would have created a desire for people to have a leadership, a management, and a sense of control. I personally tend to look at something that anthropologists call scalar stress. This is a real sense of population growth, for example, reaching a point where the current level of organization can no longer manage that level of population. That creates stress. There are 2 kinds, social and environmental. Stress clearly has something to do with the nature of driving change, particularly population growth, and its relationship to food. One of the things which we can look at is that also people have motivations to move and grab power. And I think one of the things which we have to look at is something that is a process called linearization. This is the leveling of society in one sense, and then creating institutions that build upon it. There's a sense of promotion. There's a sense of taking a society and usurping the level of what one can have as a base of influence in that society. One of the differences that exists between a non-egalitarian and egalitarian society is that in the non-egalitarian society, someone controls wealth. Otherwise, in an egalitarian society, things are leveled out. People have access to almost everything. And one of the things which I think you have to recognize is that anthropologists talk about something called a cargo system. That as you look at someone like a big man in society, They have an obligation to give things away. They are the distributors of the surplus. This obligation is seen as sort of like baggage or cargo that they carry. I think that Ken Flannery has identified something which I think is important. It's called usurpation. This is where individuals begin to meddle, and they change a system by usurping the level of their own position in that society by what they do in meddling with the way things are. Flannery also sort of relates this to the integration of something called linearization, centralization, and promotion. These are really dynamic pieces that move along a line that leads to different levels of social complexity. Flannery will talk about this in terms of something called hypercohesion. The idea that as population growth and urbanization both are occurring, that there's an increasing importance for the flow of things, particularly information, that is going to affect how effective management can be within an organization. Simply, there is greater and greater complexity that is arising as populations grow and the needs of that population expand. In a way, this is a model that sort of looks at the idea that there is a hypercohesion that exists, that there's a flow of information which is disrupted by the scale of society. That stress leads to greater and greater complexity. And even in that, people in power cannot see necessarily the sense of flow, because the flow of information is so complex that it gets lost. The real food for thought, I think, is that as the processes unfold that drive chiefdoms in the states, there is a continuation of that. There's more formal management that's required. There are new institutions that need to be developed. There's a whole sense that this is increasing, and that does not stop once you get to these civilizations. Those civilizations have to create adjustments to the increasing scale and the increasing hypercohesion from within. This is why we can talk about the rise of civilization, but we can also talk about the rise, the fall, the collapse, and the disintegration of what is a complex society, trying to find some simpler way of dealing with the world.